In this video, we're going to go over the questions from page 113 and 116. From page 113, how might rising sea levels affect Canada? Coastal areas in the Pacific and Atlantic could definitely be affected. Areas such as the cities of Victoria and Vancouver could definitely be flooded. If you take a look at Vancouver, a good portion of the city is actually protected by dikes and is below sea level. And you might not think it would affect us very much, but in Vancouver, that is a major shipping port for us. We send a tremendous amount of grain out of the Vancouver and lower BC mainland. So if it did flood, it could cause many problems for us financially in Saskatchewan. Page 116, number 1. What are some effects of climate change on people in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada? Temperatures are rising in parts of central and southern Australia, and there is less rainfall. Changes in temperature could also affect the waters of the South Pacific region. Number 2, why do different regions of Australia, New Zealand, and Pacific Islands experience different natural disasters? The regions experience different natural disasters because they have different geography. Bushfires would occur in arid climates that have vegetation that are easy to burn. Low-lying areas are flood-prone. Coastal areas are vulnerable to cyclones, storms that form over the ocean and move towards the coast, or tsunamis as well. Question number 3. Compare and contrast the effects of natural disasters on people in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. Floods in Australia and New Zealand, it affects low-lying areas. Severe floods hit Brisbane, Australia in January of 2011. In Canada, heavy winter snowfall and heavy rain and rapid spring snowmelt can cause floods. In 2010, if you guys remember Miranda's Heritage Fair project from a few years ago, she actually did it on this. In 2010, the highway at Maple Creek got washed out, and Walsh Colony actually suffered quite a bit of flooding. And in the spring of 2011, I remember this one quite well, Saskatchewan experienced the worst flooding in 150 years. So if you can think of, excuse me, my lakefront at the lake, my dock, the rocks in front would be all underwater. The stairs going up onto my deck would be partially underwater. There would be water in my boathouse. The old boathouse would have about a foot or two in it. The boat would actually be floating in the boathouse. Bushfires. In Australia and New Zealand, they're brought on by drought, heat waves, and vegetation that burns easily. In Australia, there's been major fires in 1994, 2002, 2009, and then just this previous school year, we talked about the fires that were there quite often. In Canada, forest fires are caused by dry conditions and high temperatures that are common. And those are common in British Columbia and the Canadian Shield. Just a couple of years ago, we saw how Fort McMurray was dramatically affected by that drought. In Australia, during the Federation drought, it struck from 1895 to 1902. Some rivers dried up, forcing people to relocate. In Australia, a major drought from 2002 to 2006, they saw a huge amount of cattle starve to death because there was not enough food or water, and water use was restricted within the country. In Canada, probably the best example of drought would be the 1930s drought that occurred in Saskatchewan and in the Prairie provinces. That ended up being in conjunction with the Great Depression. Earthquakes. An earthquake registering 6.3 on the Richter scale struck Christchurch, New Zealand in February 2011, causing extensive damage. That's not mentioned in your book. In Canada, our major earthquakes that have hit actually go back hundreds of years. However, based on geological research, the Vancouver area is long overdue for a major earthquake. It is part of the Ring of Fire as well. Cyclones. Darwin, Australia was hit in 1974, leaving half of the population homeless and killing 71 people. Australia was hit again in 2011 as well. In Canada, I guess you'd have to go back to 2010 when Hurricane Igor hit Newfoundland and Labrador. That storm smashed a pile of boats and washed away roads in the province. Question number 4. How have drought, flooding, or severe storms affected where and how people live in your area? Well, we can definitely, in Saskatchewan, we can go back to the 1930s drought again. We saw a tremendous amount of people move away from this province because of the drought. And it devastated the farming industry where we did not have crops and we didn't have feed for our cattle. In other parts of the country as well, flooding has ruined cropland and property. Tornadoes and severe hailstorms have caused major damage in different locations, definitely affecting numerous people.